Views expressed by Camaplan podcast guests may not reflect those of Camaplan. Camaplan does not guarantee the accuracy of information provided by guests, nor does it endorse or recommend any individual or organization. Camaplan is not an investment advisor, CPA, realtor, or attorney. You are encouraged to conduct your own due diligence before making investment choices. For any tax, legal, accounting, investment, or other questions, please consult a specialist. Hi, I'm Michael Duncan, and welcome back to The Road to Financial Freedom. This podcast is brought to you by Camaplan, a self-directed IRA administrator focused on educating investors on how to grow retirement savings faster through alternative investments. In each episode, we're going to take an in-depth look at the many roads taken to financial freedom and how they differ for each of our guests. Our goal is to help the listeners learn how they can achieve their own financial freedom through the experience and stories of experts that have done just that. Today's guest is an executive coach and leadership/team development expert with a doctorate in organization development. She delivers her coaching with practical strategies and actions for leaders and their leadership teams to build the right foundation for teamwork and productivity. She developed Team Accelerator, which helps senior leaders and their leadership teams build systems and habits for successful change and sustain improvements going forward. I am very excited to welcome Margie Oleson to the show today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing wonderfully. We were talking a little bit before the show, and as soon as I got to your name, I panicked because, like I said, I have an Aunt Margie, and I'm like, oh my gosh, is it Margie? Is it Margie? But proud to say that I remembered that you do not say it like my aunt. So little peek behind the curtain there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very excited to have you on the show today. I'm very excited to kind of just learn a little bit more about you. Typically when I'm preparing for these podcasts and, I'm kind of trying to do research, I almost, it's kind of like reading or watching trailers for a movie where I like to watch the teaser trailers where I'm kind of getting an idea of what's going to happen, but I don't want to watch too much, all the TV spots. And nowadays there's so much marketing. I don't want to learn too much and give too much away as to what I'm going to learn on the show, because it almost takes away the fun a little bit. But I would love to really just start with, what is it that you do? What is Team Accelerator?
Yes. So Team Accelerator is a method to help leaders and leadership teams finally build the cohesive team from the ground up. And that means that they're cohesive, they're in sync, they're a well-oiled machine, they're operating and rowing in the same direction, they're operating together instead of in silos. And all of those activities and benefits manifest and cascade throughout the company by virtue of it happening at the leadership level. And I was inspired to create this methodology and implement it because I had been in corporate America for several decades, and everyone was having the same issues. Leaders in all industries, in all sizes of organizations, with all variety of backgrounds, were having very similar issues. And some of it was that they weren't able to approach the art and science of behaviors and leadership and communications the way they do with legal and healthcare and supply chain. And when we don't apply the principles that we've known for a long time, what actually works, we might think things aren't possible. We might think it doesn't matter what I do, it doesn't work. They may have brought in consultants and done training and had whole overhauls of staff to still find the same problems. So they might think it's not possible, but they've been missing out on the scientific, tried and true ways to help the brain, to help their habits shift in a direction that actually works for these teams.
So what led you to, obviously you touched upon the fact that, you had been in it for a very long time and you realized that a lot of people were kind of missing out on it. But what was that first kind of moment like when you said to yourself, this is something I can see myself doing as a career?
Yeah, so it was much later than I wish. I have a history of staying too long, and I had been fired many times, laid off many times in positions with leaders that it was a very uncomfortable situation. And then I would think, I can do better. I can work harder, I can work longer, I can apply more research, I can be a better team player, I can ask fewer questions, I can give fewer opinions. And then as I finally decided I really wanted to understand organizations the way someone might lift the hood of a car to say, I
Yeah.
want to understand what's happening here. And so I went back to school and earned my doctorate in organization development and was pretty surprised that most of what I was learning was information that had been out there for decades. So it might have been new to me, but it wasn't new. And so then I wondered, my spark was, how are organizations missing A, the information, and B, some way to turn it into long-term success? And that was where I really started to get excited and realize that there are so many different ways to do training and consulting and coaching in these areas. But if you're not focusing on behaviors, and if you don't have a client that once you step back, they spend time very naturally talking about behaviors that work, then we've missed the chance to put in place these important processes and systems.
So you went back, you got your doctorate, which congratulations. I always
Thank
feel the
you.
need to say that to anyone that's gotten a doctorate because I have an undergrad and I'm like, I don't want to ever go through school again. Which I don't know, maybe that tells us something about me, but that's just not my style of learning. But it's very interesting that it took, like you said, like it was very late for you, which I
Yes.
don't think is abnormal. I mean, I think in America these days and in general, obviously we're somewhat from different generations, but I think you're taught to want to be able to stay in what you're doing and what you kind of planned on doing for a very long period of time. And making the choice to go back to school at any age, once you're kind of out of that, out of the habit you've been in since you were 5 years
Correct.
old. You go to high school, you go to college. A lot of people will go straight into their master's or straight into their doctorate. Once you've left that for even a year, it's very hard.
It
Um,
is.
so, so you got your doctorate.
Mhm.
You developed Top Team Accelerator. What kind of things have you noticed in terms of, I'm trying to think of a good way to ask this question. What have you noticed are some of the biggest problems that people are facing where you can kind of walk in and it's similar to like a plumber walking into a bathroom and it's,
Yes.
something isn't flushing and the plumber always knows the first three things they're going to look at before they can determine, okay,
Correct.
I guess it's something else. So what are those things for you?
Mhm. And I will say that we're much more comfortable at dinner with peers and family and friends talking about our plumbing issues than
Yeah,
we are talking about our work issues. We will
very
go
true.
into details about our bathroom situation, but very few leaders are aware that most other leaders have similar issues that they do. They sometimes can feel like a preschool teacher. People are coming to them gossiping and complaining and bringing their problems to them instead of solving them themselves, and having fires every day. And it's the same problems over and over and over again. And leaders may not know that their peers and colleagues across the street, across the nation, are having similar issues. And so one of the first things we do, and Top Team Accelerator is a one-year program with these four pillars: teamwork, commitment, accountability, and performance. But people don't sign on initially for the 1 year. The first thing we do is set up a few months of coaching, and I come in and begin to apply the principles of teamwork. And we do some assessments and we really look at your structure. Because if you have a leadership team, whether it's at the top of the organization or you're the head of a big division, and you have 20 members of your leadership team, that's not the correct structure. Regardless of what your industry is, or regardless of all the reasons you tell me, but Margie, we have to have these 20. What I know without even coming in is you probably have 3 or 4 people being the leadership team, and everybody else is coming to meetings, being on the team in name only. And you have the same issues others have, which is teams are rowing in different directions. They're telling a different story about where they're supposed to go and what they're supposed to do. And so we look at the structure of the leadership team. We do some assessments to get a feel for how much do you know about yourself, the leader and each of those team members. How much do you know about how your behavior and communication style affect the other people? And what have you already tried? And what are your biggest issues right now? And usually most everyone has terrible meetings, which is one of the easiest challenges to fix. But the cause of it is where you need to spend more time and investment. The cause of having low performing meetings is because while the information's been out there for decades, here's what you can do to have effective meetings, and people do classes and trainings and read articles, and then they even try things, and then they come back later and say, well, none of that matters. That doesn't work. That's not the problem. But if we look closely, they never really did implement. If I ask them, did you do the 4 basic things you need to do to have high performing meetings? They might say, oh yeah, we tried that 1 week, and then we had a few fires, and then we had a few more fires, which coincidentally looked a lot like those previous fires, and pretty soon they're back to the old ways. And so then we look at fit. Are you the kind of leader and team who, when given this kind of information, have a willingness to invest to do what takes longer, which is changing your habits, changing how you think about it, and then practicing. So we do this thing where you lead the company on the dance floor. So you're dancing. And then as I'm imparting information and you're practicing things and learning, then we go up to the balcony and we take a step back and we look at how you're doing. And it becomes much more normal to talk about behaviors. It becomes more normal to talk about, oh, that meeting was terrible. That didn't work at all. And so if you have that, you and your leadership team, at least enough people have the ability to look at your own behavior, to self-reflect, to commit time, to not have your phone on during these sessions that we've had, to think that it's okay to step back and focus on that leadership team rather than going back and always going to your own team and doing things your own way. Those are the first places we look to know that you'll be able to build the entire foundation of these building blocks.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's interesting because I think, I don't have a ton of experience or time in, corporate America, quote unquote. But I definitely think that, from a lot of friends and a lot of family members and what they talk about, I think, again, not being an expert in anything, I think you're probably spot on. And, great job, Michael. You're agreeing with the person with the doctorate. Like that's duh.
Well,
But
and you can
meetings
have a
are
doctorate, but this is about execution. It's almost
Yeah.
like, how can we make execution doable? Because that's the piece they're missing. And our first leaders, excuse me, our first leaders were the people that were around when we were born. Our first teams were the people around when we were coming up. They did not have a manual. They did not have the practice at application. And then we moved into the workplace and schools, and those were our teams. And those leaders didn't know how to do it either. Everybody knows to hire, people who've gone to medical school and people who've gone to law school and people who are CPAs, but they think they're supposed to guess and just operate on autopilot doing the leadership thing, but it's actually pretty complicated. And the execution is where you want to spend time and set up practices, make agreements, and then have me be there and observe, have the team there to be able to watch how it's going, check off the items that are finally making traction and taking hold, and then go a leaper on the ones that aren't working. And everyone can be forgiven for not knowing this because it's not how we talk about it. We talk about a lot of things. We do not talk specifically about gossiping, complaining, blaming, those types of behaviors. We don't talk about how we don't know scientifically what is happening that's keeping us from succeeding.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more with basically everything you just said, especially the fact that no one really learns how to do this stuff. No one is taught how to do this stuff, with the exception of people that sign up for programs like yours. But you mentioned, the 4 main things
Yes.
of leadership, or was it meetings exactly? But could you tell me what they are? Or do I have to
Sure.
sign up
So
for the
it's
program
the
for that?
structure. It's the structure
Okay.
of your organization, the way you do your leadership team. It is, and we're talking about things that are kind of the first things that I see.
Yeah.
It's the structure. It is how each person is able to recite the story of what the leader's goals are and what the current priorities are. You can have 6 people and have 3, 4, 6 different views of that, with people that would say, oh no, we all say the same thing, until I ask them, and pretty soon they're saying different things. So it literally is then, how are your meetings doing? And how do you talk about the way you interact with each other? You can have a whole dashboard of all kinds of metrics about everything that's going on in the company, but how many metrics do you have around behavior? And if you don't have metrics around behavior, how do you manage it and make it better? And so we look at, how do you talk to each other? Do you have people, do you go back to your team and gossip to your team about that leadership team instead of keeping that trust and support and collaboration within the leadership team and growing it there?
So when you say, and it's something you've mentioned a few times, and I'm trying to look for the right words to ask the question I'm trying to ask. But when you say the way that we discuss leadership,
Mhm. Yes.
can you obviously you mentioned the idea of gossiping after the meeting or
Mhm.
whatever, but can you
Mhm.
dive into that a little bit more?
Yep.
What that
So
means?
so the leader starts with what are they going after? So they have their goals. And it can be really shocking for teams to find out, let's say it's a 7-person leadership team. So those are 7 different divisions across the company. And they are telling 5 different stories to the rest of the company for what the leader's goals are. And you can be forgiven for not knowing that because we assume that the person standing next to us is thinking what we're thinking. And we were all just in the same meeting. So of course we have the same view of what we just said in that meeting. No, the leaders need to be much more planful and testing assumptions to do leadership. It's like you're applying a model to actually being a leader. You can say something about here are my goals. And then we're going to work with you on how the brain works. Well, the brain can't just hear them once. So those leaders need to get the information in a way that brings it alive to them and helps them update their database. And then you're asking them now, how are you going to go back to your teams and make this happen with them as well? Because every person on their team needs to understand what the leader's goals are, and then what that means for the team, and then what that means for their own role. So the leader owns clarity for everyone to tell the same story, to get their team's boats rowing in the direction of me as the leader, my goals. And I need to check that with myself all day long. All day long. The number one thing that I was ever hired for, the greatest value I bring as a leader, is that every person in the organization underneath me is able to be successful. And I put leaders in place to have the network of that. And the greatest thing we all can do is be methodical about how we're leading. Do my team members know what's expected of them? Do they have what they need? And do they know what I think? Every week, not every quarter or every year. Every week, do they think I'm on track to be successful? That's leadership put into practice, breaking it down into parts.
Okay, so that helped. That made a lot of sense. How does that translate to, say, smaller companies?
Mhm.
So instead of having like a large leadership team, it's, the entire company might be 20 people, and then the
Correct.
leadership team is maybe 2 or 3,
Correct.
depending on the way you look at it. How does that translate into smaller situations?
I do it the exact same way. So it's kind of like adults in a household. When you have 2 or 3 people that are leading the company of, let's say, 10, those 2 or 3 people need to be in sync. As a matter of fact, I worked for a large company that had a 4-person leadership team, and literally 85% of the entire company fell under one of those 4 people.
Wow.
And so it's a little less about what those particular departments are, and it's a little bit more about how you work together. So you 2 or 3, and then are you telling the same story? Do you have clarity? I once was brought into a consulting firm that had 15, 18 people, and the 2 leaders were married partners. And when I came in and started to do the interviews, each of those married partners had very different views for what they were going after in the consulting world. And their teams were feeling that chaos and that confusion. And yet they're married, they live together, they work together, they've got all the opportunity to be completely in sync. And they were very happy working together and having this company. And they were telling very different stories about what people are supposed to do and how they know they're successful. And there are times where you make decisions. Let's say if you're a team of 10, you can't take on everything. It may feel like you want to at the beginning, but the truth is those people at the top, and I call it at the top, it's linear because they own all the responsibility. They're the buck stops there with all the decisions and all the responsibilities. So they get their ducks in a row. They clarify where they're headed, who they are and who they're not. They discover the pieces that they need to in order to tell that story to the rest. And then everybody figures out what their role is, how they fit into that, and how that's going. And so I would think of it as a 10-person team after that. And then you apply all the same principles.
So you mentioned that you come in and you do these interviews with the people that work there. What kind of questions are you asking the employees of the company to kind of get the information that you're looking for?
The first thing I do is show all those questions to the leaders so that they understand that we're not
Makes
looking
sense. Yeah.
for confidential information, and we're certainly not we don't spin up any buzz.
Yeah.
So we're not asking them questions that are behind the scenes, but we do just ask them very clearly, kind of like a behavioral interview where you want the 10 candidates to hear all the same questions, which is, what industry are you in? And what markets do you serve? And what work is your team responsible for? What work is this other team responsible for? And what work is this other team responsible for? And what is your role? And how does that compare with the team? And how's it going? How, what do you, and how, what do you feel are what's working? And what do you feel could be even better? And when I compile that information, when my team compiles that information, we present the results back. There's usually a lot of laughter because it reaffirms for people some of the challenges that they've had. But it also touches on some of those undiscussables that really must become discussables. There
Yeah.
can't be undiscussables. Undiscussables should be bad things that you should never say anyway. Discussables need to be everything else.
It's interesting because I can only imagine that a lot of these conversations probably just result in you getting very varying answers about, kind of like you were saying about the direction or the goal of the company. I'm sure that a lot of people, a lot of the people that you're talking to are probably either unsure of their role, or if they're sure, they could possibly be completely wrong, at least
Correct.
in relation to what the leadership team thinks that their role would be, quote unquote.
Correct.
How, so you said it was met with laughter.
Yes.
What's the next step that they take in that journey of like, okay, we have all this information now of the way, how the employees of the company are feeling about these things. And obviously you have an idea of where the miscommunications or the disconnects might be.
Mhm.
What is the next step that you
Mhm.
guys take?
We do assessments. We do the Working Genius assessment, which is fabulous. And we do a team assessment. And we might do the DISC assessment or some other assessment to get them started talking in a judge-free zone about how we're different. And we bring different things to the table. If they feel judged, if they feel like their role is in jeopardy, if they feel like someone's coming in, they're going to try to change things and they're going to leave, might as well just wait.
Yeah.
They're not going to lean in. But if we start to do some assessments and talk openly about things that they resonate with, they start to feel like there might be something here. And then we make little wins. We fix meetings right away. And we ask them to prioritize. When we talk about things that I've heard, the team has heard, then they prioritize, well, what are the first 3 things we should go after? So I have a model that we bring in and then we move through phases, but we never do a case study or something theoretical. We're always doing their work. So we prioritize of the data that they received, of the info that they heard people say, what should we go after as the first 3 things? We will eventually get to all of it. But what should we do first? And pretty soon, within days, weeks, they're already engaged. And there are instances where people don't make it through this process because they really are not someone who wants a lot of transparency or is comfortable being held accountable. But you have people right now on your team who have been waiting for this, and it becomes their freedom. Oh, and you also have people who are as natural as I am on reading a room and being able to discern what's going on with the behaviors, but they haven't had a voice because that's not been who's in charge. And so once you start to talk about behaviors more openly, people get that they can be experts on that too. And they start to participate in ways that they just haven't done at work. They may do that in another part of their life, if at all, but they certainly have not been doing it at work. And so they start to lead, and then we retrofit this model to make it receivable to them so they can execute all along the way.
That's fascinating. I can only imagine how, to a certain extent, how fun it is, honestly.
It's very fun.
It's
very fun. People cry.
bet.
They laugh. It can, and they finally get to the point where they can go head to head in ways that can, bring a lot of energy and bring frustration. All of that was already there. We're not helping anything by not talking about it. But once they move through that a few times and come out the other side, then it feels really good to say, I know that I can trust. I don't have to go back and gossip about you to my team. I can come and work with you because we have now developed roles and relationships and partnerships that we're together now.
And I'm sure a lot of it presents itself as more respectable relationships. I mean, going head to head doesn't have to be a bad thing.
No, and as a matter of fact, you want that. You want to learn how to do that because you do that all day, whether you're doing it authentically or not. And the biggest beauty, besides all the success you've been going after in general, no matter how large your organization, is once you get to the point where you start to having successes and you've become a cohesive, high-performing team, and you're tackling the different areas of your culture and your company that need to change, you're building new habits, is these issues that have been nipping at our heels: global supply chain, 5 generations in the workplace. People don't seem to be around to take these open roles that we have. Interest rates, the marketplace. These are, in person, remote. These are issues that leaders have thrown up their hands and said, yeah, that's why we have problems. So it's not us. And we couldn't even possibly begin to make headway on those. But once you now have fewer fires and you're solving your problems for good, and you're being able to identify root cause on things that you've had been as issues before, you actually learn how to invest time and habits to go off and start grappling with some of these bigger issues that just have not been something that you can tackle. And when you do, you are this collective intellect, intuition, innovation, creativity. And when you're not burnt out, and when you're not tired of the people that are doing what they're doing, and when you have moved away from this group, the person or persons that was getting in the way of success, you can actually tackle these and solve some of these issues and make it your own for your company, even if the headlines tell you differently.
Not everything has to be putting out fires all the time.
No, that's keeping you from the best, most fun success. That's keeping you from new markets. That's keeping you from shedding a product that hasn't been working. That's keeping you from revisiting a decision that everybody now knows was not the right one, but how we can't talk about that. We're so busy putting out fires.
No, that's it's very well said. So obviously this podcast, we talk a lot about investing, and a lot of our listeners are investors, and I don't know if you can answer this question, but part of investing is very much due diligence. And when investing in companies or different funds or whatever it is, there's a lot of due diligence that has to go into that. And I'm curious if there's any things that investors can look for within the teams that they might be investing in, or the teams they might be working with, that can kind of give them maybe a heads up of like, okay, maybe they don't exactly have their stuff together, and that's kind of a red flag. Or if it's very like, oh, it seems like they're very openly communicative, and that makes me more willing to work with them, or it excites me, or anything like that.
To me, the fastest, easiest approach for them is to pull that person in that's not them, who's really good at what I'm talking about. And so I said that I can read a room. There are other people that can just walk in and read a room, and they're surprised that people can't read that room. Yeah. But that's just a natural talent for them. And they are able to connect dots and follow the people processes and understand what's going on when people processes are being described, whereas someone else goes right into the balance sheet and can bring those numbers alive in 10 different ways. And so you pull that person in, and they're going to read a few of the management reports, and they're going to check a few of the headlines, and they're going to tell you whether or not the company itself is the kind of thing that you want to invest in. Maybe if you're only looking for a rate of return, then you really only need to look at, is anything that's happening now different than before when they got that rate of return that they're looking for. But if you want to have investing impact that relates to the bigger picture, or you want to do some social stuff, or there are certain industries that you want to focus on, or you want to do tried and true, long, slow investing, then that person can help you tell the story of what's going on with the company from 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 10 years ago, 5, 3, 1, and now. And then you can make your decisions combining it with the other information, but they will know a lot about what's happening with the people.
Very well said. That was exactly the kind of answer I was looking for. So thank you. And now finally, as we're reaching the end of our time here, before I ask you to plug yourself and tell the listeners where they can find you, I have one question that I ask every single guest that comes on here. And it's simply, what does financial freedom mean to you?
Mm-hmm. And this is really important. When I think of financial freedom, I think of freedom. And the leaders that don't know about something like Team Accelerator, they don't know it's possible. And when you don't know something's possible, that's the opposite of freedom. Freedom to me is about resources in general. And so we have an abundant universe and there are all the resources available. And so what happens is it's all about what I think about that and what I'm planning for. So whether we're talking about developing the team or I'm looking at my next 10 years or I'm looking at my portfolio, I determine the what. So the what are the things that I'm doing that I'm choosing, and that's why I have freedom. I don't have freedom if I'm staying in a job for 30 years because it has certain benefits, and maybe it's healthcare, and my health has suffered because I don't love being there. And so that is not freedom. So
Yeah.
I determine the what, and then I uncover every stone and do all due diligence to go after what the how should be. And it may be X amount of dollars coming in, but I can get the same lifestyle with fewer dollars if I also have other resources and am doing what I want. So you can have 3 people making virtually the same investments, the same portfolio, the same incomes, and have 3 very different lives. So financial freedom to me is freedom that I'm living the life that I want to live and knowing I'm uncovering every rock to make it happen, doing my part, and what I'm looking for will come when I keep going.
Absolutely. Very well said. You have a wonderful way with words.
Thank you.
I don't think I could have said that better myself. But could you please tell the listeners where they can find you? Feel free to plug yourself, and this information will be found in the description of this episode as well.
Yeah, so we're at olsonconsulting.com, and you can download a case study and find out how each of the pillars of Top Team Accelerator is implemented and came to life for people. And then there are videos and articles. You can fix your meetings today. Go to my website, olson.consulting or olson-consulting.com. And then also follow me on LinkedIn, Margie.Oleson, and I post ideas for free every day.
Awesome. Well, Margie, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure having you on. I feel like I learned a lot, and it was a very interesting topic to talk to an expert about.
Thanks so much, Michael. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. And as always, thank you for listening to The Road to Financial Freedom. If you enjoyed this show, please support the podcast by remembering to rate, review, and subscribe. You can keep up to date with us on Facebook or on Instagram. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time. If you like what you're hearing on The Road to Financial Freedom and want to learn more about self-directed IRAs and 401ks, click the link in the description to download a free toolkit with everything you need to get started.